I am just about to put my house on the market next week. So this is the episode for me. I cannot wait to talk about property ownership and maybe more importantly right now, financial stability.
Well, this is going to be a very interesting conversation, Holland. My experience with real estate and purchasing has been relatively painless, although one of my last purchases of a house was dependent on a 4-way closing. It's like the dominoes. If everything didn't hit the right way, nothing would happen. So I was very, very glad that I had the expert support from my realtor and the mortgage banker.
As the last conversation in our theme of money, this is going to be a good topic. We are happy to welcome Matt Carter, a commercial realtor with Joyner Commercial.
Also welcoming to the afterward table, we have Patty Noel Murphy here. She's a realtor, and according to her Instagram page, she is a dog enthusiast. I can't wait to hear a little bit more about that.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
Both of you have fascinating personal stories. In just 60 seconds each, would you mind sharing the Cliff Notes version of your life and who you are?
Okay, great. Holland, Amy, both of you, thanks so much for inviting me to be with you. Short version, 25 years ago, because of several traffic-related stories we really don't have time for, I put in my 2 weeks notice at my corporate job in building materials in Atlanta. I moved to Greenville, South Carolina, basically because of a festival my girlfriend and I had visited, and we thought it'd be a great place to live. I got my real estate license, came to work for Joyner Real Estate, and got married all within about 6 months. I'm still married to my girlfriend, still in real estate, still in Greenville, and still with the same real estate company. I still actively broker, but the guy I went to work for all those years ago now runs the entire company, and I manage his commercial office of about 30 agents. My office did about $320 million in sales last year, and the whole company did about $1.7 billion. So for our area, we are definitely substantial. I personally handled a wide variety of deals, including, just about anything you can think of: industrial, retail, restaurant, office, governments, $20 million plus deals, 99-year leases, and just a slew of mom and pop purchasers for users, purchases for users, investors of all kinds. I'm fortunate to love my business, still love my business, and to have been good at it. I'm sure we'll get more into that as we go along, but that's me more or less.
Awesome, Matt. Yeah, you've already started to drop some phrases I'm not quite sure about, so we're going to have to come back to that. All right. Well, Patty, welcome. Why don't you give us the Cliff Notes version of who you are?
Well, thank you to you guys as well for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I have wanted to be a realtor since I was 16, but my folks had graciously paid for my college and told me that, no, I needed to get a real job after college. My mom had been in real estate as an assistant to a broker, so I'd been around it when I was in high school, and that's why I liked it. So I went to work in corporate America as a financial analyst, and then ran my ex-husband's law firm after that. And so I had to find a new job, and a friend reminded me that I had wanted to be a realtor. So I finally got to be what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I've been doing this for 10 years. I wake up every day and love it, not just the activity of the job, but also I get to work with great people, and it's just a new thing every day. And I learn something new every day. Last year sold 44 homes, 16 million, I think, worth of business. And I feel very fortunate to be selected with Virginia Living and Nova Magazine as one of their top realtors for 2022. And just recently got certified with working as a Dave Ramsey trusted realtor advisor. So that's business. Personal, I have 3 kids, and when they grew up, I decided to substitute with 3 dogs. I volunteer in the community, and I'm just love what I do, and just happy to be in this phase of my life.
I love that. Wonderful. Well, we are so excited to have you both here with us tonight on the Afterword. But as we know, our audience for our podcast is varied. Some are going to have lots of experience and understanding with this topic of real estate, and some of us are not going to have a clue. So in order to level the playing field, we want to just do a lightning round of some phrases. So it doesn't matter who takes it. Both of you can jump in one at a time after the other. It doesn't matter. But our first phrase, which I think a lot of people confuse, is agent versus broker. What is that?
Matt, why don't you go first? Because I bet you in North Carolina, it is different than Virginia.
Yeah, fair enough. In our marketplace, if someone wants to manage their own real estate company, they have to become what's called a broker in charge, which is a little different than a broker. They can't really do that unless they take the education needed, though, to become a broker. Once you're a broker, you could potentially consider managing your own company. But for the consumer, in South Carolina, a broker and agent are essentially interchangeable. Except maybe that a broker has to be licensed for at least 3 years. Maybe they have a little more license education. But my experience is there are agents who've been licensed for 30 years with a wealth of experience and education. And some brokers have only been licensed for 3 years. So consumer-wise, they're basically the same thing.
Okay. Patty, what do you got?
I was going to say exactly the same thing. It really is very transparent to the consumer.
Okay, well, that's good to know. All right, this can be very confusing and sometimes be a mystery. What are closing costs?
You take this one first.
Okay, in the residential realm, it's a seller subsidy. In the past 2 years with the market as it was, really seller subsidies or closing costs for the buyer. Sellers didn't have to accept them because they had multiple offers, but it's a seller subsidy that the seller actually pays to the buyer, usually in Virginia, about 3%. And that goes to help them with with the buyer's closing costs. From the seller side in Virginia, it's a little less than 1% for closing costs for their deed to be transferred, for the actual settlement fees, things like that. But closing costs is really what you need to buy the home or sell the home.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that similarly, that the big difference, maybe commercial versus residential on closing costs, is we would just call closing costs anything you incur by selling or buying the property, meaning the purchase price may or may not include all those costs. The banks, government banks, especially on the residential mortgages, it's nice to have closing costs in the price because all of the financing is based on that price. But in my world, really, if it's the taxes or survey, attorney's fees, appraisal, inspections, environmental studies, whatever ends up on that closing statement or related to it, we generally just call it closing costs.
Okay. All right. So it's kind of the extra stuff that needs to be done in order to get the property sold.
Perfect. You said it better than I did. You should be in this business.
No, I don't think so. Okay. Escrow, as opposed to Black Crow or something that scares away things from So scarecrow, not a scarecrow, escrow. What is that?
Well, we're still taking turns. I would just say that, we also call that earnest money. Escrow, It's basically just funds held in trust until the closing. Two people have an agreement. Some funds, usually from the buyer, are held in trust or in escrow until that's completed. And then it gives them something to argue about if it's not completed.
Okay.
And the earnest money deposit from the buyer side is kind of like your skin in the game, your sincerity of how committed you are to this transaction.
Okay. I like that. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So we've heard a lot about this in the news. Mortgage rates. Everybody seems to be being very attuned to this, but there's something about some different terms that go along with a mortgage, something like a fixed and adjustable. What are we talking about in this world of real estate?
So a fixed rate is an interest rate that we've been seeing a lot, in the news. A fixed rate that percentage of your interest rate will stay the same regardless. It will not adjust. Now, that's not to say that your payment may not adjust, but your primary payment will stay the same. The only thing that can adjust from a fixed rate mortgage is your taxes and homeowners insurance. That could vary slightly to change your payment, but your actual interest rate will never change. With an adjustable rate, a lot of people with past histories knowing about them. They're going to be changing with the way the market is going right now and the products that lenders are going to be able to offer. But in the past, what it was a 7 to 10 year rate that you had on your loan, an interest rate. And then after that period of time, either the interest rate would increase by a certain amount of percentage or your entire mortgage balance is due, which most cases that's not going to be the case. And so people would take the hit on the increased adjustment. But it's going in the future from the products that I'm hearing, and Matt can probably expand upon this a little bit more. They're going to either extend the time period that it will stay fixed so that people are more apt to consider it. Lenders have to find some more products with the interest rates going up to make it home purchasing more feasible. So
interesting.
Watch for that to change a little bit.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, that's very interesting. Matt?
Yeah, adding anything to that, I would just say, a mortgage in and of itself is just that agreement between the buyer and the lender that gives that lender the right to take the property back if that money borrowed isn't paid back, right? So then in our business, the mortgage is made up just that amount of money, but there's that we call that the principal, which you mentioned. And then other things, that percentage rate, maybe that's fixed or adjustable, a term, maybe that's 5 years or 10 years or 30 years in the case of homes, not so much commercial, but then an amortization. And those all can get a little tricky, even for some professionals, that difference between a term and an amortization. But the term is how long you have to pay back that loan. But the amortization is how, what kind of pieces it's divided up in. It might be divided up into 20 years worth of pieces, but it might be due in 5 years, meaning you have that balloon payment, that principal due at the end of 5 years because you were making payments based on 15 years or 20 years, but it's been 5, so you owe a lot of that principal. A fully amortized loan would be something you started at the beginning and paid clear to the end, and it was paid off and there was no mortgage left. But that doesn't happen a lot, except, again, with homes, it happens with some people quite often. The fixed versus adjustable rates. When I got in this business, almost everything was adjustable, but it's just they'll pick something like the Wall Street Journal prime rate or a LIBOR rate, and as the economy changes or as the monies that banks borrow change, their rates change, then your rate would also change. And it might happen annually. It might happen more often or less often. But that's really the only difference. In the last, 10 or 15 years, pretty much nobody is doing adjustable rates. What they do maybe do, though, is a 5-year balloon or a 10-year balloon. I've got, fully amortized 20-year mortgages, but it always adjusts at that it's not a renewal, but on that new mortgage being signed. If you don't pay it off, you got to go get a new mortgage. So it's always going to adjust somehow, except the government backed Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac kind of 30-year home rates that it's a little different because of the government involvement.
Okay. So that's interesting. So that leads us to our last term, which you kind of stepped into a little bit, Matt, foreclosure. Yeah.
If you don't pay the mortgage back, the lender takes your property to pay for it, right? That's the foreclosure process. It can vary in different regions, but it involves a judicial hearing. A judge has to rule that they get to take your property, but you can be required to forfeit the property and then even to pay additional funds if the property doesn't cover the mortgage.
Okay. Ooh, I didn't realize the judge part was involved.
Yeah, in theory, you could walk in and put your keys on the banker's desk and they could forgive the rest, right? But that doesn't happen very much. Usually people fight it, requiring them to go through the process.
Okay. All right. Patty, anything else on that one?
No, it's pretty much you don't pay, you don't stay.
I love it. Put it into very clear terms. That's awesome. Awesome.
Statistics for the number of personal home ownerships in the U.S. is around 64%. Believe it or not, Romania has the highest home ownership rate at 96%. Is home ownership a good financial investment? And what are some of the disadvantages or advantages to home ownership?
You want to go first, Matt?
Oh, I'm happy to. I have a big one, I would say, and then probably Patty could get into the other items as well. But if you think about the mortgage we talked about earlier, if you get a 30-year fully amortized fixed mortgage on a home, right, your payment stays the same for 30 years. And now, as Patty mentioned, maybe your taxes change or maybe your insurance changes, but that mortgage payment stays the same for 30 years. And, I think we all realize that doesn't happen with rent. If you just think solely about inflation, your single dollar purchase, just $1 in 1992, 30 years ago, now costs $2, meaning rent would be twice as much now as then, just taking into account just only inflation. And your mortgage payment would be exactly the same and would, in theory, then disappear completely. So if you bought something when you're 20, by the time you're 50, you have no rent payment, you have no mortgage payment. I would say that's the biggest difference, but there's probably a number of others.
I think that if you look at it just compared to other types of investments, it's the best growth investment year over year. If you compare it to anything, like as far as going back to 1992, I mean, I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with over the years, and even the increases, smaller incremental increases were like 5 to 7 generally in our region year over year. The past 2 years have been exponential at 18, 20% year over year. So it's always the best investment and then investment that you can hold on to and cherish, walk out in the grass and be a part of. It's a little farther removed, and you have to work a little harder to make your investments with a mutual fund or whatever you're working with a financial advisor, perhaps, to make sure you get that rate of return. It takes a lot of work to get that rate of return on anything in the market. So that's why I think it's the best advantage. Tax advantages some people point to, but those have become so minimal that it's really not as the benefit that it used to be. And I would say truly the only disadvantage that I see is just having to stay on top of things. When the dishwasher breaks, you have to fix it. If you're renting, of course you don't have to, but you're, like Matt alluded to earlier, your rent's not increasing year after year. Then you have to stay on top of things. You have to maintain things. I would see that as the only disadvantage to home ownership.
Yeah. Real quick, not to jump in out of turn, but Patty, something you said there made me think about that. If your stocks completely devalue and your real estate completely devalues, I would say, well, at least I can go sleep in my real estate, right?
Right.
I can still go touch it, feel it. It's there. It's tangible. You don't actually own part of a business. Most people don't when they own stock. You do with real estate.
Yeah. These are such good points, and again, we did an episode on for those that are unhomed and homelessness. And one of the things that we talked about is the skyrocketing rent and how difficult that is, and maybe different paths to home ownership. So this is a really, really important point. I appreciate you all kind of explaining this a little bit. So Matt, you shared with me a little bit before we got started that you're in a new building. What do you think the future of commercial real estate is going to be, and what are some of the trends?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, it depends on what segment of real estate, like commercial real estate, we're talking about.
Okay. Maybe tell us some of the types of commercial.
Oh, yeah, happy to. Industrial real estate is stronger than ever. There's strong demand both from the tenant side and also the investor side of pushing that market on. I think really across the board. I don't know so much about the complete north or some things about the west side of our country, but the rest of our country seems to be very strong on industrial. Retail is constantly affected by Amazon and the rest of the internet. So it continues to evolve, but it's still the stores that have a local presence have better internet sales than the places that they don't have a local presence, because people like that comfort. They want to be able to take it back if they want to. Target is big on that statistic for them. How an office is doing depends heavily on each region, how office the market in general is. Hotels fluctuate like crazy. Multifamily strong throughout the Southeast, the East Coast. Again, I'm not sure about the rest of the country. And really as a market, the marketplace, the commercial real estate market's entirely different than single family homes. But even within that, commercial market, there's just a lot of market segments. But I always think about it this way, I guess, as long as we keep manufacturing items, we distribute them, we shop for them, we work and we travel, we rent, then the future commercial real estate should be, continue to be alive and well. But we do cycle. We cycle with normal economic trends. If you overbuild, then the rents will go down. If you don't have enough product, then the rents go up. And so it depends on any 5, 10, 15-year cycle of those, that construction process.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are some of the trends you're seeing? Because I know in the Greenville area, it's a high manufacturing area for certain products. So are you seeing some trends that you're going, wow, I think this is where we need to look at?
Our rents have doubled, tripled in some ways on the industrial side. Downtown area retail has done the same, but a lot of our suburbs, the office rents, they really haven't performed as well. Office buildings in general take a lot of updating, a lot of reimagining as you continue to reinvent what the new trend might be. Maybe we could throw in some trends and say that'll become, office might be less important as people work more from home. I think there's still a lot of advantages to working with a group of people, but I think we've seen some change in that just with COVID and other things.
Right.
The world's smaller and the internet is better and communicating digitally is easier. I think that'll continue to go. I don't really, a lot of people are gloom and doom on retail. I think they've had a lot of time to adjust and they'll continue to do that. Any given store, if it doesn't reinvent itself constantly, is in jeopardy. But multifamily is the big one right now in our area. There's not a mom and pop investment you can go get with multifamily right now. You can't go buy 8 units and not overpay an astronomical amount to get it. And so I think that'll continue probably to be filled in by the big groups, just like industrial has been. The best thing for small investors to look at, I think, is a highway or corridor they like, an emerging area they like, and buying something they can afford. That's really the way to go with anything. Not the return they might get, but what could they pay for now, and then hold on to that investment.
Okay. Good advice. Good advice. All right.
Patty, what are some of the steps you take when you're helping a potential buyer or seller to navigate the world of real estate? I mean, how do you help your clients prepare to manage this investment?
So it's very important to me for them to trust me and to build that relationship of trust, because this being generally the biggest investment they're ever going to make, I want them to make it in confidence and look to someone who they see as an expert that they can trust my responses and my guidance. So that's where I really start. And depending upon who it is, a buyer or seller, that can go either way. Most of my work is referrals. I don't do lead generations, mostly because, although I did just become a Dave Ramsey advisor, I will be working with people I don't know. It's important to me that they come in with some level of trust with me, whether a friend suggested me or whatever the case may be, because we're going to be navigating a lot of hurdles. And I want to know how they communicate. I want them to know that they can trust me. It's more important to me that is the basis of this transaction than any commission I could ever get. It's more important to me that their dreams are met. And so what I do generally is, for buyers, start that relationship, but make sure they're qualified and make sure they're comfortable with what they're qualified. They could be qualified for a certain amount of money, but they don't want to spend that much. And I love that I'm seeing that trend more and more and more, whereas before people were maxing that dollar out. People are like, yeah, I know I can afford this much, but I'm more comfortable at this level. So that's refreshing to see. And I'll tell you, it's a lot of times with the millennials. I love working with millennials. A lot of agents don't. I really like it. I've never had issues. So it's something I look forward to. I go through a series of questions with them. I have buyer guides for both the sellers and series of questions for sellers and buyers, so that I know where they're coming from. My expectation could be very different from theirs. So just getting to know them. I want we review the contracts even before we get started, particularly with a buyer. It may be a buyer that hasn't bought in like 10 years. Yeah, it's not their first rodeo, but things have changed since even 5 years ago with those contracts. So I review both of those with them before we even get started to make sure they know what we're doing and understand the process a little bit better. But my job is to advocate and educate, and that's kind of how I run the show for that.
Wow, I love that. Advocate and educate, because it does sound like things change dramatically.
Yes. Like I said, I have to learn something new every day. So, and I'm sure Matt can agree, the market's ever evolving, and things that were even last year don't even make sense anymore, whether it's whatever it could be. And we have to stay on top of that. And that's why it's really important to go with somebody that's experienced.
Right. Yeah. Well said. I know even depending, Matt, you were talking about the age of your building. I would imagine there were lots of things that were not in code when you all moved into your new building. So even understanding that part of helping the buyer and seller know, okay, I'm going to go for something brand new versus something that's older. Here's what I have to navigate, and getting through that hurdle. And so having someone who can advocate and educate is perfect. That sounds wonderful. All right. So I feel like we have a little bit of terminology under our belt. We're looking at some of the benefits to owning real estate, and you all made that very, very clear. As we close out this first episode, I would love for you to wrap this up, put the for sale sign, if you will, or the sold sign in the yard, and give us an essential element of what we need to understand about real estate. And Matt, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, well, anyone who's in real estate has a lot of stories that they that you hear, and we have a lot of colorful stories and big personalities. That said, over time, operating within your means, right? Now that's the big part. Operating within your means, everybody eventually wins, in my opinion. The biggest wins that you hear about, these amazing wins, they're usually out of luck or because someone maybe had some specific information that no one else involved had. But the big losses are actually pretty controllable. They're usually because someone took a big risk, didn't have the horsepower to carry a mortgage during a downturn, or after a loss of a tenant, or because they made a bad assumption about their business. There's a lot of things a good broker, a good professional, a good real estate agent could do for you, a realtor can do to help you avoid major mistakes in the purchase, right? The immediate purchase. Okay. And the long term, it kind of takes care of itself unless you did something that you should have known was foolish to begin with and really stepped out in front of what you could afford. Some of the stories you hear, just because if you're involved in real estate, you get a lot of stories, and you are able to have a lot of wins, and you'll have a few minor losses. But like stocks, you only lose money when you sell it. You don't have to lose money in real estate ever if you just keep it. And so I would always encourage a small investor to look at the long-term hold. Buy something you want and keep it as long as it's within your means. Okay.
Excellent. Patty, how about you?
I would just like to add that with regard to, finding someone that's experienced, someone you can trust, and just rely on an expert. That's the essential element to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a complex process. And so having that expertise is critical. So thank you.
Special thanks to Patty and Matt. This was a helpful and enlightening conversation. While you wait for part 2, please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. Leave us a review and tell your friends about us. You are always welcome at our table.